Hi, I'm Danny Gregory, and I love sketchbooks, and I have a big collection of them. And with each video that I bring out in this series, I'm taking you through one of the books in that collection, many of which you can acquire yourself. You can go online and buy yourself a copy if you find inspiration in this video. About 10 to 15 years ago, I went into Tower Records, a long gone record chain, and Tower Records had a section in which they sold zines, and zines are sort of self-published little magazines, small runs, that are just made by creative people all over the place. And I like to go and check it out and see if there's any inspiration. And this particular time, I came upon a little magazine called Moonlight Chronicle. And this is the very first issue of Moonlight Chronicle. And it's basically an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that was folded in half. Now, what was great about this magazine and what intrigued me about it was that inside there were drawings, but there was also a story. This was basically the story of a man's life. And it is his journal describing every day what he was doing, living out in the woods in Oregon. And the drawings were fairly crude, fairly simple. The lettering was pretty crude. He would cut out pieces of text that he thought was interesting, and he would paste it in there. Here's a quote from Walt Whitman. And it was just really clearly a real journal. I mean, there in 1992, that's January 13th, there it is. That's the date that he wrote this. And it was just really interesting to me to see what was clearly, just a journal full of drawings, and simple drawings, and drawings of wildlife that were really carefully done, and other drawings and there were stories about him and his relationship with his ex-wife, and the place that he lived, and his philosophy, and all kinds of things. And I thought, boy, this is really interesting stuff. And so what I did is I wrote to him and I said I'd like a copy of some of the other issues of this magazine. And soon I started to get them. A lot of them had the same cover, they were the same shape, and they were, each of them, filled with these kinds of stories, drawings of, here's a careful study of a fly, and here's a dead mouse, here's an old truck, and again, all these stories and this writing. And you could see even within a few issues that this guy's drawings were getting better and better. Here are drawings that his kid did. It's just like everything in his life was in here. And to me, it was just very inspiring, because I thought, this guy is sharing his life, but also, at the very least, he's recording everything in this book, and maybe I could do the same thing. Eventually, he's changed the cover a little bit, and then he started to change the format to become this square. So he folded the paper the other way, so it was kind of slightly more book-like. But honestly, it was that first drawing, that shape of that page, that probably attracted me to it. So it was a good idea. Let me get these out of the way. So, as I said, over time you can start to see that his drawings are improving, his composition is improving, his lettering is getting better, his ideas he's getting better at expressing himself. And this magazine would come out every few weeks. No, I guess every couple months, really, there would be another one. And basically, he would fill up this entire journal. So, and as it says here at the beginning, limited to a handsome edition of 150 copies. So that's really all it was. It was a very small number, small run, and he was charging $5 for it. Well, I wrote to this author a number of other times, and his name is d.price. He lives in Eastern Oregon, and he lives a very, very simple life, a very unusual life. There are lots of interesting stories about him and his life that you can discover, frankly, as you read this, because he believes in living a very simple life. And that was also part of his appeal to me. I mean, here I am living in New York, being an ad guy, in a high-pressure situation, high-pressure city, and there he is living this very, very simple life out in the country, communing with nature. And, so on the one hand, we had very little in common, but on the other hand, we had a lot in common because we both loved this idea of recording our lives in drawings and pictures, and ultimately sharing it with the world, which is what he was doing, and which I eventually came to do. So, you know, he continues to make these books and recording. You know, I mean, I just love these kinds of drawings that are very simple, all essentially line drawings. Every so often a little tiny bit of tone, but really these drawings, these books were all made on printed on a photocopier, and that was why they were so simple. But his style of drawing, completely based on observation, and very, very simple but charming. And his writing is also very, very engaging, and his philosophy is wonderful. So I really came to like it. And also he would do things like this, like when he discovered an artist who he liked, like in this case Wayman Liu, he would reproduce some images from his work just to show that he loved this and that this is what he was trying to achieve too. And eventually you would see those people he admired affecting his work as well, all kinds of stuff. And then ultimately he changed format again. Started to become, he got a bit thicker. These are printed on newsprint. They're a bit, the magazine itself is a bit thicker, and it has a colored cover. So, and then you know, there's another this one is a little smaller, and this one is in New York. He and I became better and better friends, and eventually we actually hung out together and drew together. That's my late wife, Patty. This is a walk through our neighborhood. These are some drawings of mine actually reproduced in here. And there's my dog, Frank. There's also photographs. Dan is an incredible photographer, and that's actually how he had begun his career as a photographer. I introduced him to Robert Crumb's work, and that had a big influence on him as well. But these are all drawings from my neighborhood. Here's a map of my house, some of the stuff. There's my son. So I got to really see him doing this, and I got to hang out with him, and that was really fantastic. So there's a photograph of him. So another person who he admired and so forth. So then ultimately there were more and more of these issues, and ultimately he produced about, I think 78 issues. This one might be one of the last ones. This is number 73. But as you can see, as it evolved, you know, he tried different colored paper that it was printed on. I think his layout gets better. His drawings get more and more confident, and you really get to see his evolution. So Dan had started this whole process when he was, I think, in his late 30s, probably. I mean, when I met him, he was in his early 40s. So yeah, I guess he was in his late 30s. So he had started drawing kind of around the same life stage as I had. He's a couple years older than me. But he had been a photographer. He had been like a local photographer for local newspapers. And he had been publishing a magazine about photography, and he had started to do these little illustrations in the corners of that magazine. And over time, he decided that he loved doing these drawings so much that he wanted that to be his focus. And he continued drawing until he ultimately stopped publishing Moonlight Chronicles about 6 or 7 years ago. But if you go to moonlightchronicles.com, you can still buy back issues. And as I said, there's 77 of them. They're inexpensive. They're extremely inspiring. You can also, if you'd like, get a copy of his book. This is his book, Moonlight Chronicles, which is, in a lot of ways, kind of a beefed up version. It has color in it. It has a lot of his philosophy, photographs, his way of telling stories. Some of it is directly from the magazine. Some of it was created specifically for this. There's Dan. But it's a beautiful book. And you know, as you can see, he does so many different kinds of drawings. He draws maps. He draws objects. He takes photographs. He draws food. He pastes things in, quotes, and he does a little bit of watercoloring there. So very simple, his style, but very beautiful, I think. And really, as a person who is interested in keeping a journal of my life, d.price was probably the most inspiring influence that I ever had. And I really commend his work to you. He also has a book called Radical Simplicity, which is about his way of keeping his life as bare bones as possible. He lives in a very interesting way where he has a series of little tiny buildings that he lives in on a meadow in Oregon, and he describes all that in this book, which is called Radical Simplicity: Creating an Authentic Life. So d.price is he's actually kind of gone away from drawing over time. He was also always been an athletic and outdoorsman, and he has focused, kind of switched his interests from drawing and publishing his magazine to surfing, and he spent a lot of time in Hawaii surfing over the last few years, and then he became involved with making music. He started doing some paintings. So he's an evolving creative person, but this particular period of his life, a good 10 years, are captured in this fantastic magazine. If I were you, I'd do what I did, which is get the entire set. They're just fascinating. You can just read through them over the years. They're really, it's just like an ongoing story, like a reality TV show captured in drawings. It's about how his children grow older and sort of move away, his tempestuous relationship with his ex-wife, his love of nature and the environment, trips that he goes on. He travels around the world to different places, and he really is an explorer and a liver of life, and a very, very interesting person, and a very inspiring keeper of journals. So I strongly recommend Moonlight Chronicles by d.price. Thanks very much. It was fun talking to you this week, and I'll see you again next time.